Hello everyone, it is, me, it's Garrett. It is the end of April. I know I keep sort of revising the plans on these OzTube videos, but as I kind of discovered, reading through Ozma of Oz, after getting out of Wizard, I think mostly because they quit, I don't want to say they quit trying to be something, because they're definitely they're trying to be enjoyable, obviously. But there's less in terms of scholarly things to talk about with them. So, trying to make 2 videos, I just didn't have enough when I hit the halfway point. So instead, what I'm going to do is it's going to be the end of each month, we'll do a video over the book from the previous month, or from that month. So, we'll be doing Ozma of Oz today. Once again, I used a post-1935 edition. I was, thanks to getting the book collector's guide to L. Frank Baum and Oz, which is over there, and I'm not going to get up and go get it right now. But thanks to it, it's a fabulous resource if you're a book collector, or if you're an Oz book collector at least for the vintage books. They stop after the white editions, which makes sense. That's really the last round that Riley and Lee published themselves, so totally makes sense. But I was able to pinpoint that it is from 1934 to the late 1950s. So, and it's interesting because if you look on the cover, there are some characters that don't exist in them. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be Mombi or the Wicked Witch of the West, but there's the Wizard and the Woozy, who's not been introduced yet, and I thought and the Patchwork Girl, Scraps. Definitely have not been introduced yet, but here they are on the cover of Ozma of Oz, also known as Slinky Ozma cover. So, Ozma of Oz, it picks up after the events of the Land of Oz. It was first published in 1907. So if you go off of what I personally believe to be Dorothy's age of 6 to 7 in Wizard, 7 years have passed, but I feel like realistically it's probably only been 2 or 3. Because Uncle Henry, the farmhouse has had time to be rebuilt, and she's obviously been back from Oz, so there's been enough time for the farm to be rebuilt and to be doing well enough for Uncle Henry to take a vacation to Australia. I'm going back to my notes. So let's see. Sorry, I should have been a little more prepared. Alright, so the first big noticeable change is in Dorothy's appearance. This is Neil's first opportunity to illustrate Dorothy, and she's definitely aged up for obvious reasons, because time has passed. But here's probably the first really good picture we get of her. There she is, looking very contemporary of the time. Personally, I think she looks a little bit wealthy for being a farm girl. She looks a little bit too much like Samantha from American Girl. She's blonde now. And she's not quite as chubby, which, given that she's now probably 8 or 9, yeah, that makes sense. And this adventure starts off with Dorothy and Uncle Henry on a trip to Australia because Uncle Henry is ill. And of course, there is a storm. So, for those playing at home, this is Dorothy 0, Weather 2. And clearly the farm is doing well enough that they're able to afford a trip to Australia on what might have been an ocean liner. I'm not really sure. Neil's illustrations are a little confusing, and I admittedly don't know much about sea travel at the turn of the century, but that's the boat they're on. And that to me seems very haphazard to be going from, I guess, California to Australia. But what do I know? And Dorothy winds up on board, or on deck during the storm because she's trying to find Uncle Henry, and gets swept away by the storm. She manages to secure a position inside a chicken coop to ride out the storm. And that brings us on our start to our journey. And in Chapter 2, we meet what has really very quickly become one of my absolute favorite characters that Baum ever created. And I know she shows back up, and I'm very glad for that. But it's a yellow hen who's initially named Bill. It's a hen, but the little boy who she belonged to didn't know when she was hatched that that's what she was. So he named her Bill. And so she's always been Bill. And she's very scrappy. Very, very, I mean, the book really almost should be called Billina in Oz. Dorothy takes some indignation to this. This is on page 33 of my edition. Excuse me, no. I wrote down 33. Oh, I'm at 31. I don't know why I wrote 33 down. So, the exchange is, well, my name is Bill, said the yellow hen somewhat gruffly. Bill? Why, that's a boy's name. What difference does that make? You're a lady hen, aren't you? Well, of course. But when I first hatched out, no one could tell whether I was going to be a hen or a rooster. So the little boy at the farm where I was born called me Bill, and made a pet of me because I was the only chicken in the whole brood. When I grew up, he found out that I didn't crow and fight, as all roosters do. So, when I grew up, and he found out he did not think to change my name. And every creature in the barnyard, as well as people in the house, knew me as Bill. So Bill I've always been called, and Bill is my name. But it's all wrong, you know, declared Dorothy earnestly. And if you don't mind, I shall call you Billina. Putting the Ina on the end makes it a girl's name, you see. Oh, I don't mind it in the least. It doesn't matter at all what you call me, so long as I know that my name means me. Which now would be a big, big argument, but in 1907 is kind of a joke. And it's a fascinating thing because this is now 110 years later. And names have changed genders. It's just an interesting that through today's social lens, again, makes the argument of transgender. Does your name really define who you are? etc., etc. And Billina fights. Billina is the hero of the book. Billina actually comes back several times and says, I don't know why she calls me Billina. I'm perfectly happy being called Bill. Billina is the greatest. Let's see. So, we also, with Dorothy now being back, and Baum trying to be contemporary, or trying to show she's sort of a country bumpkin, I haven't decided which, Dorothy gets this obnoxious habit of using ridiculous contractions. And so I kept a tally. It's a new game called How Many Contractions? Chapter 3 has it the worst. She has no contractions in Chapter 1. There's no dialogue. There are 7 in Chapter 2. And they first show up on page 25 assuming that I numbered things correctly still. Oh, and she says comfortable. COMFOR''BLE. This happens throughout the entire book. Enough so that John Troutman, I believe that's who it was, in his comics that he commented on the series, one of the panels in his Ozma of Oz one is Dorothy speaking in contractions and Ozma looking at her going, "Are you speaking in tongues?" Because it's insane and kind of annoying. So they land on this beach, and the story progresses. This is where you meet the Wheelers and the Lunchbox Trees. Lunchbox Trees and Dinner Trees, actually, from in this, but it was simplified in Ozma of Oz, or Return to Oz. The Wheelers are creatures who, instead of hands and feet, have wheels that actually grow like nails, like our fingernails, so their wheels are keratinous. And that's so weird to me. Like, that as I was reading kind of legitimately freaked me out a little bit. So Dorothy and Billina escape to some mountainous area where the Wheelers, because they can't climb, because they can only roll, can't reach them. And Dorothy discovers a door built into this mountain, and there was a key that she found on the beach. This is into chapter 4, and that's how she meets TikTok. TikTok is a fully functional mechanical man, and Dorothy winds him up, and he tells her that he was created for the King of Ev, which is the country they are in. And the King of Ev was very cruel, and he had a lovely wife and 10 children, 5 boys and 5 girls. But he got angry at them one day, so he sold them all to the Gnome King in exchange for a long life. Of course, after this exchange, the King of Ev felt badly, and so he drowned himself. First he locks TikTok in this chamber in the mountains that's just randomly there, and then drowns himself, thus ending his life. Sometimes things are just too good for other people. So now he's indebted to Dorothy. So in the next chapter, TikTok explains where he's from, his creation, and TikTok gives Dorothy Dorothy brings up Oz, and TikTok goes, "Oh, well, this is what's happened while you've been gone." So Dorothy gets caught up on the events of the Land of Oz. So they finish their dinner, she's caught up, and he says, "Well, let's go see Langwidere." Princess Langwidere has the big pun of the book, because it looks like Langwidere, and by modern pronunciation it probably is Langwidere, but it's actually Langwidere, as in a languid air. Mom loves his oral puns. So they go to the Palace of Ev. They're greeted by the Princess Langwidere, who once again hides true evil behind beauty. And as many of you probably remember from the scenes in Return to Oz, where they merge Princess Langwidere with Mombi, Princess Langwidere has 30 beautiful heads that she can change at will. Usually one for every day of the month. And some of the heads are nice, and some of them are not so nice. And of course, Dorothy runs against the head Langwidere is currently wearing, and gets herself thrown in the dungeon. And Billina gets thrown into the barnyard, and TikTok, who has worn himself out fighting Wheelers and various other things, is now physically worn down his action to be able to save her. But never fear, all is not lost, because, of course, along comes Ozma of Oz and a troop of friends who are crossing the deadly desert. There they are. We get to meet a new friend, the Hungry Tiger, in a moment. So they arrive because they're coming, they've heard about what's happened to the Queen of Ev and her children, and they want to help. So, of course, then Ozma is more than happy to rescue Dorothy. And Dorothy is freed. And we get this hilarious illustration on the bottom of 116, which is officially my new favorite illustration ever. So that sets off the next part of the adventure. We meet the Hungry Tiger, who says he's always hungry, and the thing he wants most is to eat a fat baby, but his conscience won't let him eat a fat baby. So we're all just really lucky that this tiger has a conscience. This is one of Baum's more bizarre characters, but I think Baum finds him easier to write than the Cowardly Lion, and he definitely shows up a lot more often. Also, of note, most people have now assumed that the tiger that the lion meets in the forest towards the end of Wonderful Wizard is the Hungry Tiger. He just isn't named yet. And I would agree with that. So now Dorothy and Bellina, and of course TikTok, are going to join Ozma as they head off to the Gnome King. And this is where the action really sets in. They go to the Gnome King's dominion. There's lots of action in this book. This is one of the more adventure quest-heavy books. And it moves at a very, very brisk pace. It's pretty much now that they're all together, they're off, and they get to the Gnome King's dominion, and he tells them, well, I turned the queen and the princes and princesses into ornaments, but I'll let you have 11 guesses. And if you guess correctly, then you don't turn into an ornament, but if you don't guess correctly, you do become an ornament. Which, of course, is gonna happen. Most of them can't guess it. Dorothy gets lucky. Ozma does not. And Bellina decides to roost, because the gnomes don't like chickens because eggs are poison. So Bellina roosts under his throne. Well, that night, after almost all of them have been turned into ornaments, she overhears the Gnome King talking to his main servant, his butler, telling him that, oh, well, I turned all the people from Ev into purple ornaments, and all the people from Oz are green ornaments, and since the Scarecrow and, TikTok are so ugly, I turned them into gold ornaments, and on and on and on. Gnome King also has a magic belt that he wears around his waist. So Dorothy manages to rescue one prince. Nobody else succeeds. And Bellina argues that, well, she should be able to go in, and then since she's a chicken, if she doesn't win, hey, he's rid of the chicken. So Gnome King agrees. And, of course, that's what happens. She rescues all of the ornaments except for the Tin Man. The Gnome King is understandably angry, but because Bellina has laid eggs through the course of this, because this has been a couple of days since she lays an egg every morning, and the Scarecrow's been keeping watch of them, the Scarecrow is able to attack the Gnome King with eggs, which enables Dorothy to steal the magic belt from him. And everybody is saved. Hooray! Except for the Tin Man. They can't find the Tin Man. But that's okay, because it turns out he's been picked up and put in the pocket of one of the princes, because he thought it was pretty and he wanted it as a toy. So the Tin Man does actually end up getting saved. They return to Oz. Ginger makes a fabulous appearance, where they encounter her on their way back to Emerald City, and Ozma asks, well, where's your husband? She says, oh, he's in the house nursing a black eye, replied Ginger calmly. The foolish man would insist upon milking the red cow when I wanted him to milk the white one. But he will know better next time, I'm sure. And Dorothy then decides, they get back to Emerald City, and Dorothy's like, well, you know, I've been gone, like, 6 or 7 days already. Uncle Henry already thinks I'm dead. I'm just gonna hang out here for a little while. She hangs out for 2 weeks. And then she's like, oh, well, now I feel bad. And Ozma introduces the magic picture, which allows her to see anything she wants anywhere in the world. And she sees that Uncle Henry is sad, so she asks Ozma to send her back to Uncle Henry. And Ozma agrees, laying down the groundwork for the next couple of books, where Ozma will look in every Saturday at like 4 o'clock for Dorothy, and if Dorothy gives the signal, then Ozma will bring her to Oz. This plays very heavily in the next book. So Dorothy gives Ozma the magic belt because Glinda tells Dorothy, hey, if you take you could take this to go home, but it's just going to go away like the silver shoes did, and that seems like a bad idea. Which brings the question that, had Baum intended to write more Oz books, would someone else have used the silver shoes to send Dorothy home? So Dorothy returns to Uncle Henry, and all is well. Billina stays in Oz because she says, well, I can talk here and there's magic. Why wouldn't I stay? So, that's sort of in a nutshell the plot of Ozma of Oz. There's a lot more action. This one definitely has some just very witty jokes and moments that are just beautiful. There's a fun little bait and switch when they first meet the Gnome King, where Dorothy says, oh, well, he looks like... I mean, he looks like Santa Claus, only he isn't the same color. And the Gnome King turns around and he goes, he had a red face and a round little belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. And it's a great little bait and switch, because everyone says that the Gnome King is super fair, and he's this nice guy, and, you know, he doesn't welch on his deals, and so this comparison to Santa Claus just seems so natural. Until it turns out it's not, and he is not going to let them leave, until the Scarecrow fortunately remembers he has 2 eggs from Billina. So it introduces the Gnome King. The Gnome King is actually, he and then his successor king are probably the most prevalent recurring villains in the series. Mombi does come back in 1 or 2 of the Thompson novels, but Baum comes back to the gnomes in Emerald City and Rinky-Tink. That's its own sort of issue. Thompson, there's the Gnome King of Oz, so this is not the last we've seen of the gnomes. And this one introduces a lot of great characters. We don't really see any of the family of Ev anymore. We meet TikTok, who, it's fascinating because technology does play into Oz very heavily. I mean, you see the wizard's theatrical tricks. The magic picture almost predates the idea of television. Later, radio comes into play. There's a Victrola that comes to life at one point. And there's TikTok, who's a robot before the word robot was a thing. So there's a lot of really fascinating early things that Baum comes up with that play later into the sci-fi genre. What we now consider sci-fi and what was considered science fiction back then were very different. Most of what was being written was more speculative fiction, but that's a whole other discussion. So you get TikTok, and TikTok's speech is written very robotically. If you look here, all of those little hyphens are his broken clockwork speech. So Baum's even writing in the way he would expect a mechanical creation to sound. And it's fascinating. And it's interesting because so much of Return to Oz really is Ozma of Oz. There were things I had forgotten about. And I really, this jumped a lot higher on my list of which ones are my favorites. So if you didn't read it, I kind of gave you a crash course synopsis. I would strongly suggest this one. The other thing this one sets up is the mildly annoying ending that Baum likes to do, where he's not very great at his endings. So there's a lot of books where everything sort of seems to end with a big party at Emerald City. That's what happens here. He doesn't do the Where Are They Now thing from Land of Oz. But it's like, oh, well, we're going to go just have a party in Emerald City. And Dorothy's like, I'll just chill for 2 weeks. Uncle Henry already thinks I'm dead. Which is just horrifying to me. And it's interesting, there is a picture book adaptation. Which I may talk about those later when I've finally acquired at least one of the others. I've got 2 of the 4. But in it, they sort of do away with that. It's we're back to Emerald City, everyone's safe, let me send you home, Dorothy. And she's like, sure, cool, great, peace. Interestingly, the picture book version also cuts out Languid Air completely. Alright, so, that's kind of Ozma of Oz. This was the first in his contract back with Riley and Lee, where he was contracted for, I believe, either 3 or 4 books. And he definitely intended to end the series with Emerald City of Oz. So next up is Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. This one was one I really enjoyed both as a kid and then again when I started rereading the series when I was about 22. I know there are a lot of people who are not a big fan of it. My copy is was likely printed in 1939. Interesting because Handy Mandy is on the spine, and that's kind of how it's been able to be dated. Handy Mandy is on the spine of, I believe it's Oz Planning, which was printed in 39. So probably in an effort to get more titles with characters recognizable from the MGM film out, it was probably what happened. It's essentially the same as the popular edition. There are no color plates in this one. And I've got a little bit of spinal damage, or cover damage, which is sad, but that's okay. So yeah. So, we're going to start tomorrow with Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, which brings Dorothy back stateside. So, I'm sorry again that I'm trying to figure this all out. So, like I said, the last Sunday of the month, or last Monday in this case, it was last Sunday because I had a rough week and didn't get back in time to try and do it before this. We'll do the next OzTube video. So, anyhow, I hope everybody is doing great, and I will see you all next time.